Okay, so I think that's 5 o'clock. So should we go ahead and get started? Hello, everyone. I think we probably have some people still trickling in, but let's go ahead and get going. So it is my pleasure to welcome you to the DTX Insider Series webinar on transforming healthcare with the AI. Thank you so much for joining us for our second episode of the series. I'm Pej, the producer of the DTX conference series, and we have partnered with Decimal.health to bring you an engaging conversation outside of the conferences that we usually run. And these are across the US, Europe, and Asia. So AI has become a really integral part of the healthcare industry, as a lot of people know, playing a critical role in improving healthcare delivery, decision-making, outcomes. However, implementing AI in healthcare doesn't come without its challenges, and it's essential that we understand the nuances of activating AI in healthcare. So that's something that we're going to be diving into in this webinar. We'll be bringing together early adopters and influencers of healthcare AI to dive deep into the various facets of AI in healthcare. So we have our esteemed panelists today here with us who will be diving into this really interesting topic. So we have Kamal, who will be leading us through the discussion, Anand, Anka, Joe. But before I hand it over to Kamal, I want to take a moment to remind everyone that the DTX Europe Summit is going to be coming to London in June. And the DTX conference series has become the home of digital therapeutics. And we hope that we can see you there. At the top of this thing, you can see that I don't think it came through, but we have a code, Decimal.10. So please use the code Decimal.10 to get 10% off registration, and that can apply for DTX Europe, DTX East, DTX West. And without further ado, I'll send it over to Kamal, who can take us through today's discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pej, for the introduction, and also thank you to the DTX conference series that Pej is representing today, that are partnering with us on this DTX Insider series and putting it together. So we really appreciate the partnership. So welcome, everyone, and really appreciate having all of you attend here. I know that attendees are just trickling in, so we'll hopefully see that continue for the next few minutes, but we'll just get started. I'm really excited to have this panel here today. I will, in a couple of minutes, introduce the panelists and give them a chance to talk a little bit about their role and their involvement in AI as well. But the genesis of this conversation that we're having today actually happened a few months ago, where we got together and really talked about, what does it mean for AI to be transforming healthcare? ChatGPT has really made it a thing that everyone's talking about and discussing, and suddenly brought AI and the conversation around AI to the forefront. But it's not this recent. AI in healthcare has been around for a while, and we've all, in our own respective jobs, had a lot of experience with it. And we wanted to sort of, grab the opportunity to be able to have a meaningful conversation about this, because for people who've been thinking about AI and the implications of AI for a long time, know that it's not as simple as just logging into ChatGPT and putting a few commands in and getting some answers out. The potential here is much, much larger. So what we'd like to explore today with you all is sort of what are the applications of AI? Where is AI most applicable, most suitable? How should we think about AI? And then for organizations that are thinking about AI and thinking about moving into the next step, what are some of the guardrails you need to think about? How do you be careful about it? How do you first do no harm? Because that's our oath to our patients. But then at the same time, meaningfully integrate some of these technologies to be able to improve the lives of our patients and our providers and our administrators in the hospital. And I'll start the panel with a couple very quick stories of AI from very early in my career that have still left me very excited about the potential for AI. The first example was a study that we did at Mass General Brigham to help patients with type 2 diabetes walk more. And it was a really simple study. We gave them Fitbits, we measured their physical activity, and then we picked different times of the day to send them a text message to encourage them to walk more. The AI behind it, fairly dumb at that time, but the AI behind it, basically what it did was it figured out whenever it would send you a message, it would figure out whether you did have activity within the next 3 hours. And the more activity you had, the closer it got to that time of day to send you the message. So if sending you a message at 6 o'clock got you more activity, then that becomes closer to the time that it would start to send you messages, versus let's say message you at 8 in the morning and you didn't have activity for the next 3 hours, the machine would decide that's not a good time and would try something else. As I was analyzing the data from the study, we saw that there was one patient getting messages at 4 a.m. consistently. And my first reaction was, okay, our AI messed up and the machine is not as intelligent as human beings, and we should call the patient and apologize. And we were doing a post hoc interview with the patient and realized that the patient was actually a night shift worker. And that was the time when he was returning from work. But in the 20 years that patient had been seen at Mass General Brigham, no one found that out. None of us figured that out. We were giving him medication, assuming he was having dinner at 8 p.m. So this poor kid was taking insulin at 8 p.m. and then not eating dinner at that time and having dinner when he came back from work at 4 a.m. And we were surprised that we weren't able to control his diabetes. So to me, one of the biggest interesting things there was, okay, a machine was able to find out within 5 days, something that as a health system we couldn't for decades. And to me, there's so much power in that, in how we can connect the dots. So we don't think, or I personally don't think, that AI or machine learning is just something that's additive. And I do think that there's some ways in which we can use it in a way that it can become a force for good. So with that example, with that level of excitement, I'll kick the panel off, and I will turn it over to Ankur to give us a quick intro and talk to us a little bit about his organization and the role he thinks AI can play in healthcare.
Awesome. Thanks for that story, Kamal. That was really great to hear. Thank you for that. And thanks for having us on this panel. This is a wonderful conversation. I'm glad to be part of it. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ankur Caldera. I run Hop Labs. We're a production scale machine learning consultancy. We focus on building real world AI systems for enterprises and funded startups. And the healthcare and life sciences space is rapidly growing for us. We're seeing a lot of opportunity and interest in all stages of the pipeline. So we've helped NIH funded startups sort of build scalable AI systems. We've helped therapeutic companies develop sort of machine learning reproducible research. And we've also helped pharma companies use AI for drug discovery. I think there's a lot of opportunity across the spectrum. One of the things that I think most interesting here is that historically in healthcare and life sciences, there's been a lot of interest in sort of the standard use cases, analyzing data patterns, sort of the imaging, radiology, dermatology kinds of things. And we've done a ton of that kind of work. But in the current moment with this sort of generative AI and the ChatGPT great technologies we're seeing and expect to see in the next 18 to 24 months, I think we're just beginning to scratch the surface on all the different things AI could be doing. And I think that's why it's a great time to be having this conversation. Thank you for including that.
Thank you, Ankur. Joe, would you like to go next?
Yes, sure. Hi, I'm Joe. I'm the founder of Wiser, which is conversational AI for mental health. So it actually is AI that you talk to for therapeutic support. We started Wiser 6 years ago, long before ChatGPT, with the hypothesis that, when you are struggling with your mental health, it's like you're drowning. And a therapist is like a lifeguard who'll come and save you. And you might have friends and family that you can lean on, but after a point, you feel like you're pulling them down as well. So a machine becomes like a floater that you can hold on to at any point of time 24/7. And that conversational AI can be that support system that people have that allows them to go through life. With that context, we had to navigate what a lot of people using ChatGPT are going to have to navigate today, which is what kind of conversational AI do you use? How do you make it clinically validated? How do you make it usable? How do you build a therapeutic alliance between a human and an AI, which we've been able to prove that we can do at par with a human therapist and faster than a human therapist? How do you make it private and secure, which Mozilla Foundation now, amongst all the apps out there, rates us as the best of privacy for the second year in a row. It's something that we've had to figure out, which means that we've had to do fewer generative AI, more natural language understanding, and all the way down from a digital therapeutics perspective to an FDA breakthrough device designation, putting quality management systems in place. And with 6 million users globally, this is something that is now delivering success at scale. And I'm just here excited to talk about how we can use some of our learnings in putting the right guardrails to achieve these outcomes around people experimenting with ChatGPT.
That's awesome, Joe. Thank you. And finally, I'll turn it over to Anand for your intro and a little bit about your organization as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks, everyone. This is great to be with such a great team on such a great topic. So Anand and I are Chief Analytics Officer at WellDoc. For those of you who may not know WellDoc, we're a digital health leader, a global company, really known for how we transform healthcare with our chronic condition platform, if you would. And what we do is we integrate AI-driven, the notion of personalized, real-time actionable insights into the daily lives of individuals living with chronic conditions like diabetes, hypertension, their comorbidities, such as myself. I have diabetes and hypertension myself. But what we ultimately do is we enable them to improve those health outcomes and economic outcomes by taking advantage of these digital health solutions. Our solution today scales across multiple conditions, across the broader cardiometabolic space, if you would. So diabetes, hypertension, heart failure, integrated mental well-being, kind of this notion of connected care anywhere, right? And the idea is that you also want to not just empower the patient, but you want to empower the health plans, the health systems to extend what they would normally be doing in a face-to-face or in a teleconsult model, right? The platform itself is device agnostic, so we kind of take a different approach than many. We actually connect to over 400 different devices, systems, EMRs, labs, pharmacies. The idea is to remove the friction, if you would, of how a patient interacts with their data. It's more than an app. We feature kind of AI-driven digital coaching, and I think the advanced AI actually allows an important facet, which we'll discuss later today, but it allows for the correlation of what otherwise would be siloed health data, right? So if you start to look at medication management, labs, diet, activity, symptoms, all the things that these patients need to do, in many ways, just like Joe said, you're uncovering the things that may not be seen by a human. You're uncovering these things that can be seen and visible to a machine that can then help the delivery of human care. And so we do both types of learning. We do rules-based AI, we do adaptive machine learning AI, and they work in conjunction in our FDA regulatory pathway. So we have been cleared as a class 2 medical device for type 1, type 2 diabetes, really to help advance features and functions like insulin management. I think this collectively allows us to pave a more powerful pathway for how we advance our AI models, how we advance the inclusion of AI to better help these patients in a personalized, evidence-based journey that gets them to a better outcome, that gets them to a better place.
That's great. Thank you so much. So I'll kick it off with my first question, and this is a little bit of a one-on-one question. So forgive me for that, but I feel like we just wanted to set up a little bit of common ground and common language among all of us. There's a ton of terms going around. There is generative AI, ChatGPT, obviously. There is machine learning, artificial intelligence. There's a lot of that. Can you guys help us define what these terms are and what the boundaries of these terms are so that we're all speaking the same language? Ankur, given all the great work you guys do in this, I'll get that started with you and have the others add on to that, if you don't mind.
Sure, yeah. No, that's great. And I think there's an important distinction between the technical definition and how they're sort of commonly used today, right? And so artificial intelligence, broadly, the definition technically is any system by which an artificial entity like a computer can make an intelligent decision akin to what a human would be doing, but not involving a human. And there's a variety of techniques. Anand mentioned rule-based machine learning that's also commonly used. Rule-based AI is commonly used also for like playing chess, things along those lines. But the current set of techniques that are showing the most promise are these techniques we call machine learning, which is basically getting a machine to make good decisions by teaching it from data and teaching it to recognize patterns in data. And it's not the only way to do it, but that's one of the ones that's most effective in the current stage. Machine learning is also old. It's been around since the 70s. But deep learning in the last 5 years has generated a tremendous progress. And this is sort of all the news you hear about machine learning in the last 5 years has been driven by this deep learning-based progress, which is, come to market because of the availability of traditional significant compute and significant data sets. And then in the last sort of year, we've been seeing all this generative AI, which really has its seeds in machine learning researchers asking the question, can these intelligences learn to be creative? Can we ask them not just to describe something or to predict something, but can we ask them to think original thoughts? And that's using techniques from generative learning. All the previous techniques have also become much more powerful. All these techniques are transferable, but that sort of perspective has unlocked these Mid-Journey, DALL-E, ChatGPT style technologies you see in the market. And I think that's where a lot of potential still remains to be seen. And that's my take on it. I'm sure Anand and Joe, you have a different perspective.
Joe?
I can, yes, there are two things that I'd like to add to that. One is just from a conversational AI perspective, a lot of it is about the transformation of the human-computer interface as well. So we used to have a human-computer interface where a chatbot meant multiple choice questions, almost an IVR-like interface, and people didn't expect it to do anything except specific intelligence. So if you asked it for a transaction exactly what it was trained to do, it would be able to do it, but you couldn't talk to it anything beyond what it was specifically trained to do. And a lot of machine learning focused on that because these were transactional AI. Even with things like Siri and Google Assistant, you would end up being able to only ask it to do certain things, and it would say, sorry, I can understand. You can ask me about things like A, B, and C. Now, what you're seeing transitioning is artificial general intelligence, which, up until ChatGPT was a pipe dream. Up until ChatGPT, the human-computer interface was, okay, AI will be able to answer one or two things, but it won't generally be able to talk to me. Even when we use natural language understanding within WISA, we try not to tell them so transactionally. So it is a prompt-based conversation that feels a little more like artificial general intelligence, but it isn't because it isn't generative in nature. It's only got a set bank of a lot of answers that clinicians have approved, but it has a set bank of answers. Now, when you have a combination of generative artificial general intelligence, then you have something really crazy from a human perspective, because you can literally ask it anything, and it actually can figure that out, and it's been tested and iterated. But it also makes it very dangerous because humans will ask it to do things that are potentially dangerous. So the more strong you make your AI, the more you need the guardrails. And that's sort of the quandary that we find ourselves in.
Yeah, maybe just Kamal, just to add a couple of thoughts, taping together some of those thoughts. I love to draw pictures. Those of you who know me, if I had a whiteboard, I'd actually stand up and do it. But we shouldn't think of these different, whether it's rules-based, whether it's machine learning, whether it's generative. We shouldn't think of these as, hey, it's either or. In many ways in health, these things can coexist. And they coexist almost in a continuum. And for us, as a regulated class 2 medical device, that continuum is often defined by risk. So for example, you use generative AI for simple topics that are low-risk topics that address conversational items like exercise, like what's the best meal choices, and things like that, that are generally low risk as governed by the regulatory bodies like the United States FDA. But they also have, when you have somebody who has a specific medical condition like celiac or whatever, then obviously what they eat is important. And there's guidelines. As you climb the ladder to go to machine learning, now you start to put pins in the sandbox. So you can still have your machine learn and come up with things that maybe we don't come up with, but they're done against a series of evidence-based guidelines. And they fall within the constraints of those evidence-based guidelines. And then, of course, there's the very top of the triangle, which is the high-risk stuff, typically medication titration, insulin management, things like that in the case of diabetes, where it is fixed, it's rules-based, it's not going to be any combination there and thereof, because you have risks to manage and then liabilities associated with those risks. So we think often as AI as a continuum, and you can judiciously use any one of those forms. You just have to map it onto the correct risk level. And I think by doing that, you have an immense opportunity to unlock value in different ways that we're not doing today.
So I'll add sort of follow up on that specifically, and I'd love to hear from your perspective. Are there ways in which you're thinking about all the different use cases that AI in general, and maybe even generative AI can sort of enable within healthcare? And if you want to maybe talk a little bit about the categories of use cases and where you're seeing traction, where you're seeing positive results, and where you might be worried or concerned.
Yeah, so just building on that continuum, in the case of when you look at, for example, our platform has principal vectors of engagement, right? People engage with their medications, they engage with their labs, things that they measure, blood pressure, weight, blood glucose. They engage with their food, activity, sleep, psychosocial, kind of the 360, if you would. And the idea here is you can absolutely, and we are using the concept of machine learning and generative AI on the lower risk stuff. So if you want to provide best examples or give fresh examples, because people don't want to see the same feedback all the time when they enter something. They want to see something fresh, otherwise they're not going to use the app, right? At that point in time, it's failed. I always say that the headache doesn't go away unless they swallow the Advil, right? So they have to swallow the Advil. In this case, they have to use the app. So engagement is paramount. So you say, okay, what AI techniques can I use to drive that engagement? Bring them back into something that they wouldn't otherwise know. Maybe I should try that form of exercise today, or I can do this yoga instead of this thing because it's going to get me to the right place. It's going to get me to burn the right number of calories, et cetera, et cetera. But then as you go up the ladder, what we're learning, for example, with machine learning is when you connect, for example, a continuous glucose monitor to a digital platform like our Blue Star platform, and you then say, okay, I have a CGM trace, doesn't mean anything to a lot of people. Trained endocrinologists know what to do when they look at a CGM trace, right? But most humans, even primary care doctors, are like, okay, that's interesting. How much time were you above and below kind of that range? And what happens in between? I don't really care because it's all green. But those shapes are important. So we've actually trained a system to recognize those shapes and then give feedback to the patient about those shapes. So a machine actually automatically detects and classifies those shapes into different severity levels. Hey, and then it tells them at the end of the day, hey, look, Joe, you had this many good shapes and this many bad shapes, or at the end of the week, hey, you're doing better than you did last week. And then, of course, you have the rules-based stuff, which is all the stuff I discussed above. And so I think for us, we're actually putting these into our regulated products in a judicious way. And what's interesting for us, looking at the FDA, looking at Health Canada, looking at PMDA in Japan, TGA in Australia, they're starting to embrace, because to Ankur's point, hey, this is happening, and there's a hell of a lot of interest on that machine learning piece and on the generative AI piece. And I think they're starting to shift the goalposts. They're starting to move and allow more innovation to occur, provided that you maintain safety and whatnot, right? And so I think that trade space is an important one for us. I think it's going to evolve, everybody moving to create more value, which is going to be fun to watch in the next 2 to 3 years.
Ankur, any other use cases, any other areas that you've seen AI being applied to today that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I think the really interesting thing for me, and the thing I get excited about, is not just how do we make our current processes better, cheaper, or more frequent, but how do we enable new processes that don't yet exist, right? And this is like the significant part of our population that is not yet getting access to medical care because it's too hard or too rare, or get access to medical care too infrequently. Like Anand was saying, I may go see my doctor about my diabetes, but what happens in between visits? And how do I get the support when I'm at a restaurant to decide what to order that works for my blood type and my glucose level? There's no reason an app couldn't exist where you take a picture of a menu and you get a recommendation, and then you get a follow-up recommendation to take a longer walk because you just ate a dessert thing or whatever else, right? There's all sorts of things you can imagine, and these technologies are being leveraged by media companies and retail companies to help you consume more content and tell you more stuff. And it'd be a shame if it wasn't being used in the healthcare ecosystem more thoughtfully. So I'm really excited about that opportunity. And I think we see that also in the pharma side. The drug discovery process, this sort of pipeline model that we've traditionally had for years. We all know it's very expensive. It's something like 10, 12 years and $1 billion to bring a drug to market. And there's a question of, like, if you leverage these kinds of scalable insights across a pipeline, across a portfolio of pipelines, how do you change the process to fundamentally rethink how drugs are brought to market? And I think there's a really interesting thing there. Sorry, go ahead, Anand.
No, 20 seconds, Kamal, and I'll shut up, I promise. Ankur said something that's really important, which is there's a dual value proposition of what he just said in the food example. We actually do that in our product today. We actually have the food API. We take a picture of it. One is, if you imagine a complex plate, a thali, for everybody who knows what a thali is, when you go to an Indian wedding, right? You're getting this, 20 items on a plate. And you want to start recording each one and how many calories and fat and protein, like, good luck, nobody's going to do it, right? We take a picture of it and it auto detects, right? Because it's been trained to detect. So what have you done? Ankur said you create new processes that didn't exist before. And that's great. But you also remove friction of adoption. That's cool. Because now, and you think about it as people, I'm not a social media guy, let's put it out there, but everybody takes pictures of everything these days. That's what they do. It's just a behavior, right? You take a picture of everything. Hey, look at my food, what I had for breakfast. Hey, now a diabetes patient's using that same behavior to actually help manage their health. And you couldn't do that if you didn't have these types of systems and these types of algorithms in place. So it's opening up new opportunities that just didn't exist. So that's a really important point he said.
I agree.
I actually, we talked about all these use cases from a patient perspective, but I think there are two other perspectives to consider. One is as product creators. especially, I'll just go back to ChatGPT, because it's changed how you need to look at AI. AI used to be something that your AI team did for you based on a use case that you defined with the market. Now, I think every organization on this call will need to have an acceptable use policy, because there are people across your organization who are probably using AI in ways that you want to put on that risk matrix and say, this is okay, run as fast as you can, become more productive, or these are ways in which you absolutely do not want to use them. And we are seeing use cases all the way from the kind of models that Anand was describing, being something now that you can literally put data into an open AI platform and it will generate the model for you. And so what used to be, months of writing an AI model has become just adding data. Localization has become very easy. So in fact, the Singapore government has been experimenting with putting in more localized content on what they're using Wiser for, and trying to see whether you can create more local responses. There is ways in which you can use AI for clinicians. So patient summaries that clinicians would mine. A primary care doctor could probably put in now the CGM report in and ask it questions. If you just add enough data into that, you could create a model where the primary care doctor is just uploading that CGM report and say, does this and this actually indicate that? And you will start seeing people make these things up and start using them like they use Google search. And so we have to think of use cases of what each person wants to achieve that they couldn't achieve before. And just from a content creation perspective, sleep stories, we used to buy those. Now our person can say, write me a dozen sleep stories that have this length and have these contexts and start from here and go to here, and AI will write them for you. And another AI will use the sound and talk about them for you. The way you generate content is completely different today.
Yeah, and I think along with that, I think one of the things that you're saying, Joe, that's really important is we have to remember that ChatGPT is not a glorified or an improved search experience. It's actually a language model, right? And so when used correctly, I mean, I think we're seeing a lot of articles out there that marvel the intelligence side of ChatGPT, like, it cleared the USMLE, which, it's an ego blow for all of us doctors, but it is what it is. But that's probably less impressive than some of the more recent things that came out where they compared the empathy quotient of responses that doctors wrote up and that ChatGPT wrote up, and somehow ChatGPT was 5 to 6 times more empathetic in its responses to patients.
Do you know why that is, Kamal? I saw a podcast where they talked about what they did that turned ChatGPT from all the other language models to do that. They call it sort of human, it's real-time learning with humans in the loop. So they actually got humans to see 2 outputs of ChatGPT and tag the one that felt like it answered the question better, just on nuance. So they were actually using humans to train ChatGPT for that undefined empathy quality, so that ChatGPT would be more empathetic. And that feedback loop is everything, whether you're human or artificial intelligence.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we do have that feedback loop with physicians, but obviously it's not at the level at the scale at which ChatGPT is ever going to be able to sort of do, right? But that's interesting, because I feel like, one of the concerns that came up at the very beginning when we were talking about AI and healthcare is, you're going to take the human touch out of it. Well, guess what? We're probably enhancing the human touch with this, which starts to sort of have all sorts of implications on how do we deliver care, right? Are we physicians better diagnosticians? Are we better care providers? Are we more empathetic listeners? Are we more empathetic message givers? Like, what part of that care continuum are now we better than the machines? And then how do we optimize that mix? Because at the end of the day, the reason we're having this conversation today is because there is something fundamentally broken about healthcare, which is there is a demand and supply mismatch, right? And that mismatch is not going to get better. We are not training enough people in addition to who we are training today in order to meet the supply demand mismatch. We're not training them in the right specialties. We're not, there's a lot of things that are not going to work better. We're burning people out at faster rates than ever in history. So it is an important piece for us to stay here. And so picking up on that, right? If this is here to stay, if we need to figure out the right optimized ratio of involvement, then the question of guardrails comes up really importantly, right? Which is, how do we make sure that we do no harm? And then how do we make sure that guardrails can be put into place and that this is now safe and effective to use? Because whether we like it or not, it's going to get used. Whether we like it or not, patients are going to go to ChatGPT and ask about their symptoms, and we need to do something about it. Or our doctors are going to write notes using ChatGPT, right? And that's going to happen. So, Joe, I'll start that one with you because you've had a lot of time thinking about this. But talk a little bit about what is the framework that people should start to think about, especially as health systems or providers, and then how have you thought about guardrails in general in your experience with WISA?
So. We, in fact, came out with a white paper that talked about it. And the first framework to do is to understand the difference between generative AI and natural language understanding, or even machine learning that would then feed into a rule. And what that really means is that if each time AI is going to come up with something different, that at some level you cannot clinically validate. So there is a danger that it would come up with something tomorrow that you will not be able to explain, and it may be clinically inappropriate, and it has the potential to do harm. You want to avoid that. And a lot of conversational generative AI, now that AI has moved to artificial general intelligence, if you start using ChatGPT, that is the danger. And there's this thing called digital delusions, where it will come up with phrases which actually never existed. And when asked why it said that, when it's clearly untrue, it would say, oh, I just thought it would sound impressive. So it's starting to sort of understand that what you wanted to say and not really worrying about the hard truth of what you're saying. And that's the place where you need to do a risk matrix. So for us, for instance, when we, just like Anand talked about, we start out with if it's clinical. If somebody is talking about symptoms, if somebody is in SOS, suicidal, high risk, all of those things, you go promptly to a rule-based engine. You have natural language understanding, and creating that guardrail. In other places, you will have AI guardrailing AI. So assessing the risk of that particular situation is AI, and then deciding whether you can use a generative component in a patient-facing way or a clinician-facing way, or you need to move to a rule-based model is AI. And then you add in that rule-based component so that wherever you need to be able to predict what's happening and be able to defend it, if tomorrow in a court of law or if in the FDA, you're going to be asked how it was clinically validated, you have that answer. Now, the other component of it, when you leave the generative part of it apart, it's just that a lot of this AI, you're sending your data externally. So you have to think about privacy. And while Microsoft does now sign a BAA with you, you do know that that data is going to be used to train other models. How much do you want to do that? How do you use? So a lot of guardrails about, is one of your doctors just going to be pasting a patient conversation and saying, based on these last 10 conversations I've had with the patient, what do you think? Into ChatGPT. And that has already breached a lot of stuff. So that's where your acceptable use policies comes in. That's where you're now having to guard not only as to how you as an org are going to decide to use AI or not, you have to guard also in how any individual might decide to use AI, because now it's become something that's very ubiquitous. I'll just leave you with these two. There are a few more. Do you have a white paper on this that I'll be happy to share?
That would be great, Joe. Thank you. Ankur, anything to add on that, on guardrails?
I think one of the things I'd just like to point out is that problems worth solving with AI still need to be problems you are worth solving for your organization. And so it's a very easy tendency, especially with something like ChatGPT that is taking the world by storm, for people to get distracted by these shiny objects and want to try it out on everything. And I think being clear-eyed about the problems that are actually going to move the needle or be bottlenecks for your organization is very critical. It'll actually being clear-eyed about what intervention is driving for what patient or what population at what point in time, at what level of detail. But those are all like important things to be clear about up front. And then that can drive what kind of error is acceptable for the AI to make, and whether you prefer a false positive or false negative, because those answers vary by specific use case and by the intervention it's driving. And so it's important to be thoughtful and think through it in a sort of a grounded in clinical and operational needs kind of way, as opposed to what can I do with this cool tech. I do think there's a world where we sort of reimagine the care journey, you know, from a fresh sheet of paper with what we can do with all of these new technologies. But I think right now it's important to approach it sort of this really through the fog of war and more clearly focusing on the actual needles we're trying to move in specific directions to make a difference in the patient populations. Yeah.
That's great. And I'll ask you to pitch in as well. But before I do that, I want to make a quick plug. You know, as we're nearing sort of the 40-minute mark on the panel, I wanted to also open it up for questions after this. So if you all have questions, there's a Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. You can go in there and post a question, and we'll take it in the order that we see it in. So feel free to post questions, and I'll start to open that up to for questions in the next 5 to 7 minutes. Thank you.
So one last thing, if I could. Sorry, there's generative AI stuff we're seeing is amazing, and it's really it's a bit of a black box. It's hard to understand all the guardrails that Joe pointed out totally apply. It's relevant. I just want to say from the technology side, we're poised to see similar grade paradigm changes in machine learning in the next 18 to 24 months in a variety of different fields, some of which are much more easy to interact with, right? So like we're seeing a lot of activity in knowledge graphs, which are very easy to understand and are grounding in reality in a much more critical way. There's a lot of interesting pairings of language models with knowledge graphs. So just because the ones we have today are a little bit harder to understand doesn't mean that all AI will be hard to understand. I think it's important to be expansive about how you think about where you could use automated intelligences in your operations. And so just leave it with that. Sorry, Anand, go ahead.
No worries at all. It is fantastic points you both have raised. So a couple of points that we haven't discussed, 3 specific. So one is, one of the things we're learning from many of our clients who are now, you know, they're catching wind of what's going on with ChatGPT, and they're saying, oh my God, do we have a process in place to vet a solution to see if it's actually, you know, doing the things that it should be doing? So attention has to be given on how you train these models. And when you train these models, you have to ensure that you're including representative data. You have to make sure there's no bias. You have to make sure you're not racially, you know, creating bias, no gender bias, no economic bias, social determinant bias. I mean, so how we train these models, and I think the world will catch up, and they're trying to figure out, hey, geez, we need a guideline because we got to look at 4, you know, potential vendors or partners, and we have to evaluate them. You know, who does this the right way? And it's not just the privacy, security, all the correct things that Joe said, but it's how you train your model to make sure that you're not going to create something that's going to create further digital divides. You guys got a point number 1. Point number 2 is, I think it's well known in the medical device space, this concept of FMEA, right? Failure mode effect analysis. You're basically doing a risk assessment of all your use cases. You could get use cases and you assign a risk score based on probability and severity of risk. That's a static process today. You do it once for your app because it's a rules-based thing. It's done, right? It's finished because the rules don't change. Now, all of a sudden, the rules are changing, and the rules can change. The rules can adapt because now it's a machine learning model, right? So you have to switch from a static FMEA to a dynamic FMEA. How do you continue to do the FMEA to show that you're staying within the guardrails of what's reasonable from a patient safety perspective? That's kind of point number 2. And then point number 3, to your earlier point, Kamal. People ask us all the time, is this ChatGPT is going to replace doctors? And you know, this fellow Eric Topol, who's out at Scripps in San Diego, Eric always says, people have been asking this about digital health for the last decade, saying, hey, would digital health replace these doctors? And he goes, hell no. But a doctor who uses it will replace a doctor who doesn't, okay? And why? For me, AI is a little bit like the Webb telescope, okay? When you look up in the nighttime sky and you see a point of light, yeah, it's a star. Maybe the more astute will say, no, it's actually a planet. But then you look in the Webb telescope and it's a bloody galaxy, several galaxies, right? When you look through that telescope, it illuminates things that the naked eye can't see. In many ways, AI is to the physician what Webb is to the astronomer. It illuminates things that are happening with the patient that they can't see. It's your example of what happened. You figured out that this patient's a night shift person, right? You had the data for 20 years, but nobody said anything, right? AI will help illuminate those things and make the practice of medicine, I think, better. It'll allow them to use their training in ways that they haven't used their training before to get patients to a better place and better therapeutic pathways. So I think it's exciting. But all the things we said, all of these things have to collectively be assessed to do this responsibly and judiciously.
That's great. Yeah, that's a really good analogy of thinking about it, right? It's a tool that'll make physicians better at their jobs. If you were to frame it that way, that's great. I have one more question that I wanted to pass onto the panel before we open it up for a Q&A with the audience. And this question comes up a lot, especially had come up in the earlier days of AI, which is something, Ankur, you said, right? Some AI tends to be black box, and some AI tends to be like, I don't understand with my medical training how this worked, but it gave me an output, it gave me a risk score, and it is what it is. It starts to create a little bit of an issue with trust, and how do we build that with our providers, especially our physicians and nurses that are using some of these tools to create diagnoses or treatment plans or whatnot. Let's talk a little bit about that. What will it take for us to build trust in our AI with our providers? And Anand, if you want to kick us off on that.
Yeah, no, I think I'll be brief, but I think it's doing many of the things we just said, right? People, if you have a data breach, hack, whatever it is, you've violated privacy, something, it'll shut you down. So you earn trust by ensuring that everything that you're doing in an AI machine learning still fulfills all the things that you would want in a high trust GDPR, HIPAA, SOC 2, whatever standards you're holding yourself accountable to, and you need to be held accountable to. Secondly, I think you earn trust by ensuring that you're still not creating, if you would, adverse events, right? You're keeping patients within the safe range of what they need to be doing, and you're getting them to a better place. So the outcomes, along with the minimization of adverse events, I think is really important. So I think you'll gain trust by doing the same things we do today. You're just doing it in a different way, but you're going to be measured in the same way that you're being measured today. Today, if you use a non-AI based system, they're going to ask you about data privacy and security, and they're going to ask you about outcomes. They're going to ask you about this. It's the same questions they're going to ask. You just have to make sure you can still answer those, despite the fact that you're using perhaps a much more advanced way of coming to those solutions.
Sounds good. Joe, Ankur, anything to add?
I completely agree with Anand. I think when we started with Visa and trying to do conversational AI for therapeutic support, trust was literally the cornerstone of what we were doing, because one, the market had to trust us because you're handling really sensitive information. Then the user has to trust you. The patient has to trust you with some of their innermost secrets that they don't even trust their family with. And therefore, you really have to design it in a way that for instance, we had machine learning initially that would detect that somebody had slept at night. And in the morning, it would say, looks like you didn't sleep very well tonight. Last night, you want to talk about what kept you up and so on and so forth. And that actually breached that safe space trust for a user because they wanted that to be a space where they felt it was completely anonymous, and it was still anonymous, but we were just using data from their phone to detect sleep pattern changes. And somehow in a user's brain that breached trust. And one of our InfoSec reviews, one of the things that they felt was that even though we're anonymous, even though nobody is, no PII is shared, but what if somebody inadvertently shares PII? So then we added models that would redact PII inadvertently shared in our servers. And really designing with that trust at the core becomes a responsibility when we start pushing humankind to new boundaries in medicine and AI, because people are willing to break that trust with humans because it feels like they're breaking trust with a single entity. But when you break trust with AI, you're sort of writing off the entire set of technologies, and you have to be that much more careful. It just takes one incident for the entire company to get crashing down potentially. So it becomes very sensitive.
Just to add to that, yeah, I think like the Essentially, like Joe's point is really like well taken there, that like, ultimately you're building trust with humans, and the process for doing that doesn't really change whether it's an AI or a new employee or a child or anything, right? And I think like delivering, so we just hired a new executive. We trust him, not necessarily because we know exactly what he's thinking, but because we've evaluated him and seen him in a variety of situations and seen his performance and have a system of incentives and guardrails around that to make sure that he's able to be effective in his job. And I think that the thinking through that lens will also add some clarity as to how to build not necessarily trustworthy AIs, but to deploy them in trustworthy ways that sort of gain the trust of the clinicians and the providers and the facilities so that they can actually be adopted. Otherwise, even if no matter how good they are, they won't be adopted. And that's sort of the bigger risk there.
Got it. Okay. So we have a bunch of questions to take on. Thank you guys so much for posting these. And I'll get started on the first one from Brandon. The question reads, practical recommendations to meet the challenges posed to businesses that license or otherwise use AI models to review and interpret the model for the purposes of risk assessment and disclosure and reporting. Anand, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, no, it's a good question that we live in on a day-to-day basis. I think the number one recommendation, and this is an industry-wide recommendation, is there is no reference document yet on how to evaluate these, and guidance document. We look to people like the FDA, and they're certainly working on stuff. They've put out a couple of documents for public comment and things like that. But I think the practical recommendation to meet these challenges is we need some kind of guideline that says, okay, this is what you need to do, and then you're held accountable to that. And in that guideline, it talks about many of the things we had: is the security part, the privacy part, the training part, the bias part, the sustainability, how you evolve these models, what's the process to evolve the model, how's the dynamic nature of your risk assessment. So I think the recommendations that I would put forth are, we need some kind of rules to the Wild West right now. We need some kind of guidelines. And the guidelines are never perfect the first time. They never are. Let's at least start somewhere. And then let's evolve these as we go on. But I think that's the recommendation. And that, I think, is best done with kind of a cross-industry forum, potentially being led by people like the FDA. But that would be that's kind of what comes to me in the 10 seconds you gave me to think about the answer.
Sounds good. Ankur or Joe, anything to add to that?
Well, I can just say that when we do it exactly the same, we start out by saying, if we are evaluating a licensed model, then can we put it on our own servers? So any kind of risk where you have to send your data out to another person's server is a higher risk, and it goes through a whole bunch of other compliances because you have to redact your PII before it goes out and then repopulate the PII after it comes out. So there's a lot of processing that you have to do if you're sending it outside your servers. If you can bring a model into your servers, then it goes through all of the other risk assessments, clinical safety. One interesting model of clinical safety that most people don't use, that we think everybody should use and we use, is a risk assessment for when the AI fails. So we run every single WISA use case, whether it's one prompt and what is somebody saying? What if they were saying something high risk and our AI didn't catch it? What would be the default response that happens, and would that potentially do harm? So that kind of risk assessment is something that sort of nobody asks you to do, but others, privacy, security, bias, etc. There are lots of guidelines out there that you can tick the boxes on. Just
to add to that, on the technology side, I feel like these challenges are shared across industries, not just in healthcare. Like, so for autonomous driving, if you're putting an algorithm on a car, with humans in it, how do you think about that? And I think the industry itself is coming with these certification kinds of approaches that not just speak to the algorithm itself, but how it works, the population it was trained on, what its error modes are and failure modes are. I think we'll see some solutions emerge from industry in partnership with the regulations. I think that will be interesting to see.
Okay. The next question, and we have two, and they're a little bit similar. So I'll start with the one that's a little bit more fleshed out. As machine learning continuously enhances a digital solution and changes the claim of the solution, how are you finding regulatory processes keeping pace and allowing those enhancements to come into the market? Ankur, if you want to kick that off on that, and then Joe, I'd love to hear from you as well, because you have a solution that's doing a little bit of that.
Yes, but you advised us on it, so I'd love your answer to that.
All right. Ankur?
Yeah, no, I think the regulatory agencies always play catch up to the technology. I think that's not a new surprise, and I wouldn't want to be the guy to predict where the FDA or regulatory burden is going to go on. So what sort of timeline? I will say that the Chat GPT product has sort of raised the consciousness level of what AI is capable of, just like by releasing it publicly. And so this sparked a lot of interest across all levels, and sort of driven for more stronger calls for regulatory action sooner and regulatory guidance, as Anand was saying. So I think even though historically we may have been sort of less bullish on how quickly sort of the regulatory processes will keep up with technology changes, I'm feeling a little bit more optimistic about where we are in the current moment, precisely because it's sort of caught so much attention and imagination of so many people that they're driving for action. I'm quite excited to see that. The only other thing I'll say there is that we are sort of in this global competitive pressure kind of a world where other countries are leaning into AI for healthcare, which is causing some innovation to happen overseas. And I think that itself will have some interesting sort of follow-on effects as to how quickly our healthcare system evolves to the regulatory burden that we put on our innovative systems.
Yep.
Joe, would you
I
like
think what we ended up doing was, because our conversational AI was being designed around certain outcomes, but because it's developing these therapeutic relationships, it's potentially delivering many, many more outcomes than what you had originally claimed for. Now, ML can enhance the solution, but if you say ML is the mode of work, then you can potentially have a 5.1 sort of with additional claims, and I'm now looking to Decimal for advice on that, because that's what we would do normally. And I think the FDA has been quite good in terms of putting in quality management systems, which take cognizance of the fact that you're using AI and allowing you to, box things that will change and freeze other things that won't. So it's not a completely frozen system like it would be during a drug discovery process. And that's really what you want with AI. The other thing that we found very, very interesting that's happening now with a lot of NIH trials is this thing called JETI trials, which allow for iterative trials, where you're actually doing trials on a project, but you're running 1,000 different iterations of what could be enhanced, like on engagement, and running different models. So those kind of clinical trials, where otherwise you would have to freeze something throughout a trial. A JETI trial, which a lot of the NIH R01 grants are now being written on, are actually allowing you to keep iterating along the way during the trial. And by the end of it, you come up with a product that is actually relevant for today's technology. Otherwise, by the time you finish the trial, your technology was outdated. So if FDA's through the breakthrough device process starts accepting the JETI trials, then I think a lot of the issues will get solved.
And then the FDA did come up with a guidance now specifically for machine learning algorithms. And so if people are interested in figuring out sort of how to approach that, that guideline is available online, but also we're more than happy to talk to you about sort of how to maybe parse that out and simplify that. So I'll say that we answered that question. And then I think the last question we have up here, which is, what do you guys think about how quickly the FDA will adopt? So this is maybe more of a timeline question. Do we know that the FDA is going to get really comfortable with this, and what do we think the timeline for that might be? I don't know if any of you want to hazard a guess on that. I see nodding heads. Okay. We'll just say we're cautiously optimistic and leave it at that.
I think I will say though, and it maybe relates to something else that is up on the chat window, but the FDA and their approach to digital health is actually it's really interesting, and I think it's really good. It's a good basis for us to kind of grow and what we need to grow into for AI. But it allows for a little bit of flexibility and leeway. Now, people used to ask in the early days, okay, so now you're changing your algorithm. Do you have to go get a new clearance? Every time you add a new feature, do you have to go get a new clearance? And you look to intended use. Are you fundamentally changing the intended use of your product? And then you look at the risk profile. You fundamentally change the risk profile, then you have to come back with a 510K special or 510K if it's a class 2 realm or a PMA, whatever it is. But if it's within that boundaries, it's a note to file, right? It's a note to file and you keep on going. And I think it's going to be no different. If I were to be the crystal ball, I can't tell you the time because that's we learned that one. Don't guess on that one. But if I can tell you the direction, I'm pretty confident that the direction that the FDA is going to take is very similar to what they've taken. There's going to be a leeway that says, provided you're staying within this confines of what you're doing with your model and you're not fundamentally changing the risk profile, you're not funding, you have all the tests to show it, then, keep on, you don't need to do a submission. So I think there is going to be some built-in flexibility. How much? I don't know. There'll be some. It's not going to be zero. And when we adopt that with the standard at large, TBD, but I think there's enough both velocity and mass. So there's momentum. There's momentum in the market because of the number of people who are embracing this, the number of people who are realizing that there is a value proposition from the adoption of all of these forms of AI in the delivery of healthcare as we know it. So we're getting there. We're getting there quickly, hopefully soon.
Sounds good. All right, we're nearing the top of the hour, and so I wanna close the session out with one last question to you guys, which is, for a lot of these technology innovations that have come up, we always think about whether it's a real or it's a hype situation, right? And we've heard very different comments for generative AI in general over the last few months. Some people have called it an internet level event that's going to completely transform everything that we do, and some people are saying it's just a hype cycle, one more. But if you think about AI specifically and generative AI in healthcare and as applied to healthcare, is it hype or is it real? And what makes you think that? That'll be my closing question for the panel today. And I'll now, in reverse order, kick it off with Anand.
Unmute. I think that it's a great question. Really quickly, I think that it is hype that hasn't been proven, or hype that has been proven, better said, becomes reality. And so I think that there's an interest, and there's and drivers like us and people like us will continue to lead the way, and there are many others who will lead the way. I think we will transform that hype into reality by putting some discipline to this, by earning the trust, as Joe said, all of the things that we need to do, check mark, check mark, check mark. We're going to make sure that we're going to transform it from hype into reality. I mean, the iPhone generation is 17 years old now. And the iPhone came out in 2007, so we're nearing 17 years, right? And they're all going to college, and then they're going to go to med school in 4 years. You think they're going to want to graduate with the stethoscope? No, they're going to want to graduate with a set of these AI-driven tools. So there's a certain inevitability, I think. So the hype will convert because the society is moving that way. I don't think it's inescapable. So that's just my personal perspective.
Having said that, healthcare hasn't moved since the 1970s. So just gonna say that. You still drive into town, spend half a day, wait on the phone for an appointment. Anyway.
Cup is half full, man. Cup is always half full, not half empty.
Joe, what is your take?
So look at it two ways. One, from the technology point of view, this is not hype, this is reality. But from a use case point of view, from whether it will change anything, it's all about bottlenecks. Where technology was the bottleneck, this will transform everything. But where the bottleneck was the fact that your payers and your providers and the whole system is broken, and 15 million people are going to lose their coverage this year. And for all of them, this is just hype, because nothing's going to change unless, like even with the FDA, we're all talking about how do you take AI through FDA. Nobody's talking about the fact that so many digital companies, therapeutics companies are going bust because it's so expensive to take something through FDA, and AI is not going to change that. But that's the bottleneck. It's not whether it's AI or not AI. So yes, it's all hype until you address the bottleneck, but where technology can address the bottleneck, it becomes reality.
That's great perspective. Ankur?
Yeah, I think the bottleneck is real and the friction is real, and I wouldn't claim to know how to sort of slice through that Gordian knot. But if we can, I think that we're looking forward to a very bright future. Like I'm really excited to see, the world my niece, she's 2 years old, but she's growing up in, when she's an adult, like what healthcare could look like for her. and other parts of the economy too, but like healthcare specifically, and it's a very exciting world. I mean, if you think about where in our lifetimes technology has gone, like software development in the 70s was like punch cards, right? And there's like a 1,000 to 10,000x productivity boost in sort of software development because of technology, and that's resulted in many more technologists than there ever were before. So I think like the technology industry has underserved the healthcare industry, or perhaps put another way, the healthcare industry has failed to fully leverage everything technology can do for it. But I think AI is the right sort of interface, the right kind of level to finally bring some of this to the healthcare industry and potentially have a much more bigger impact for what a doctor's life looks like today versus 50 years ago versus 50 years from now. And I'm hoping there's a big change there. So I remain excited. I'm with Anand on this one.
Got it. Okay. This was awesome, guys. Thank you so much for attending. Thank you so much for spending your hour with us. I really appreciate that. This webinar is being recorded, and we will share the recording with everyone who attended as well as everyone who registered. I want to say a big thank you to all the attendees who joined us today. A couple housekeeping notes. One, as I said, the webinar recording will be available. If you don't get it, please feel free to reach out. And number two, we do have a LinkedIn channel that we're going to start that is going to focus on people who want to think about AI in healthcare in general, and all of the people here are going to be part of it. We're going to continue discussions like these and many more, and share information about events and other things that we're going to be hosting. And we might be hosting something at HLTA 2023 as well, so stay tuned for that. And then with that, I want to say thank you again to everyone. Thank you for attending, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.